Go, Lucia. It's just part of my upbringing. But the parish I grew up in also had a strong Marian and Eucharistic devotion. And the day after my first Holy Communion, we were given the opportunity to all the girls in the parish were part of this, could be members of this little sodality called the Children of Mary, and you could offer your lives to Jesus through Mary. So make an act of consecration to Jesus through Mary. And so after, when I was just a little girl, when I was 7 or 8 years old, I offered my life to Jesus through Mary. And I just mentioned that because it was, I see how Our Lady has just protected and won and cared for my vocation my whole life. And this small act of faith I made as a little girl, she just, she magnified that. So anyways, I grew up and my family, we always went to Mass on Sunday, and I always had an appreciation for, a love for Our Lady. And when I was in high school, I was really involved in sports and wanted to get good grades, and I wanted to do something great and meaningful with my life. And so I found out about the service academies, and so I applied to the Naval Academy, and I went there, and I didn't know exactly what I was getting myself into when I was 18 years old, but I met incredible people, really wonderful people there. And I'm sure you know the military in general, but the service academies especially kind of attract really intense people. And they're intense about everything, like intense about their athletics, school, military life, and they were intense about their faith too. So for the first time in my life, I met people my age, friends who knew and loved God and were on fire with their faith and wanted to grow in their faith. And it was really eye-opening to me. And so I had friends who helped me, who challenged me and helped me to grow in my faith. And it was just for the first time in my life, I understood and heard that God loved me, and it was just this new kind of awakening in my life. And then my sophomore year at the Naval Academy, there was this opportunity to go on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And the trip was led by a rabbi, a priest, and a minister. So we were like, not the bishop, but it was another rabbi, priest, and minister. So we were like a walking joke everywhere we went. But it was a great moment for me because everything kind of clicked for me on that trip. I just realized God became man here, and the Word became flesh here. And just I could understand that, like St. Paul said, the Son of God loved me and gave himself for me. And I just had a realization of God's love and his presence in the world, and that love himself walked in this very place. And my heart was just open to these new truths. And so I was there with a group, and I was, one day I was kind of off to the side, and I was sitting in the Garden of Gethsemane, just praying, and as I was sitting there, I saw a religious sister walk by. And then something in me awakened when I saw her. I think what it was is that she was basically proclaiming with her life what I had not yet found words for in my own heart. And her presence articulated what was in me, that was deep buried in me, that I didn't know the words for yet. And so it was this desire to do something great and meaningful with my life, but the deepest desire was to give the entirety of my life, my heart, my soul to God. And I didn't know what that meant, and so I was searching for these ways to do it, but she sort of just, with her presence, said it. And so after that trip, I would just say, I think I'm going to be a nun. But I didn't really know what that meant. And I still had 2 more years at the academy. I had 5 years of service. I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know any sisters. I thought it was basically extinct during the convent. I didn't know anything about religious life. I had never even seen The Sound of Music or Sisterette. So totally ignorant of what I was saying, which was fine because I had a long ways to go. And so after I graduated, I became a surface warfare officer, and so I was on a ship out of San Diego for 2 years, and it was the best of times and the worst of times. It was, I worked with wonderful people, but being out to sea, everyone's sort of separated from everything, and you're like this floating island in the middle of the ocean. And when you're in those experiences, people ask the big questions of life, what am I here for? Why did God make me? Do I believe in God? And all of these people, everyone was it was on the hearts of other people, and it was kind of magnified what was on my own heart. And at that time, we did have Catholic lay leaders on board the ship, and the captain had asked me to do so. And so we had the Blessed Sacrament on board with us, and which was just this tremendous privilege that to know that God himself was with us, and God went out to sea with me. And there were a lot of amazing experiences I had when I was out at sea. I was really beginning to growing in my faith more, and I would pray. One of my jobs, I was the gunnery officer on the ship, but I was also the officer of the deck, so driving the ship at night. And one night I was out on the driving by myself, and everyone had gone to bed, and then I was off my watch, and I just felt this like urge to go onto the top of the ship and pray for some reason, which I never really had done. And then I went up there, and I made this silent prayer, something to the effect of like, God, do you even know where I am, what I'm doing, that I'm here? And as I made that prayer, all of a sudden, 1, 2, 3 shooting stars flashed through the sky, and it was just this just God showing me, I see you, I know you, I'm with you, and I know exactly where you are. And so it's just this confirmation of his love and his presence with me. And so I finished my tour on the ship, and then I was stationed in Naples, Italy, and which was it was a great time. I happened to be there at the same time that Father was in Gaeta, and it was an incredible time in the church because John Paul II, it was those years, his last months and years of his life, and I got to go to Rome so many times and just pray there and be in his presence. And John Paul II really helped me discover what was in my own heart. He said, as I was in Italy, and I had kind of the whole world open before me. I had a great career. I was doing well in the Navy. I could continue to be promoted, but for something in me, I knew it was never enough. And John Paul II's words were, when you dream of happiness, it's Jesus who you seek. He's waiting for you when nothing else will satisfy you. He is the beauty to which you are so attracted. It's he who inspires you to do great things with your life. It's he who inspires these choices for your life that nothing else can fill. And so his words kind of put on my heart what I knew was there, but I didn't have the confidence to respond to. And so my time in Italy, at the same time as I was discerning the religious life, I also had the natural desire for marriage. And I remember one night I went out to dinner with a group of my friends. There was all these young married couples and me and just a handful of other people. And we were at this restaurant overlooking the Mediterranean Sea, and the sun was setting, the wine was delicious, the food was amazing. Like it was something out of a movie. Couldn't have scripted it better. And I was sitting across the table from this young married couple, and I saw their love, and it was beautiful. And I remember I went home that night and I said, Lord, all this talk about religious life, forget it, we're done. I saw love and beauty, and that's what I desire. And I felt the Lord say to me in that moment, that's not my will for your life. And I can tell you, it brought me a great peace, but I didn't know exactly what it meant. And so I kind of just sat with that, and it was unclear to me. And then there was an opportunity to go on the MCCW retreat, which was in Natal that year. And I was the only one from Naples who went, and I don't even know how I found out about it, but I needed time to pray, and I needed to understand what God was asking of me. So I went on this retreat in Natal. And over those days, it was just a real time when I was able to pray and understand what it meant that God was showing me. If that wasn't his will, what was his will? And I had a great conversation with a priest there and spent some time in prayer. And what I really understood during those hours of adoration, that time of prayer, was what the Lord was saying to me was, you can get married if you want to, and I will bless you, and you will be happy. But that's not my will for your life. I made your heart for something different, and I made your heart for something more. And so it was this invitation, this proposal of the Lord with total freedom. He showed me that he loved me so much, that he respected my freedom, and he cared for me so much that I could choose something different and he would still love me. So it was this humble proposal on the part of Jesus. He was saying, you can do that, but would you be mine alone? Would you be my bride? And so, the Lord has a way of making himself irresistible. And so it was in freedom, I could choose that. And as I was on this retreat, we had some free time one afternoon, and I started to do the Lectio Divina, and I was praying, and I was just praying in the Gospel of John, chapter 14. I came across some verses that I started praying with that helped kind of solidify what was in my heart. John chapter 14 says, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would not have told you that I go to prepare a place for you. And when I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way where I'm going." And when I read those words in scripture, "you know the way where I'm going," that just like leapt off the page for me. You know the way. Jesus was showing me that I knew this. I knew this is what it was inviting me to. I knew it deep down in my heart, even though I was afraid to admit it, even though I lacked the confidence to choose it, even though it didn't make sense with the rest of my life. He was showing me, you know the way. And so after that retreat, it was clear to me I got out of the Navy. I ended up, just those days there with MCCW were just such a blessing to me, and I'm forever grateful for them. And then it gave me the courage to move on. I got out of the Navy, I moved back to the States, but all the while I had in my mind, okay, well, if I'm going to be a religious sister, I saw all those beautiful monasteries in Tuscany, maybe I could just I had these romantic ideas. I could make wine for the rest of my life in one of those nice monasteries. But the next thing I knew, I was visiting the Sisters of Life in the Bronx, and little switch there. But when I came back to the States and I visited different communities, and the Sisters of Life kept coming up, and so I didn't know who the Sisters of Life were, but I eventually went on a retreat, and when I went on the retreat, I couldn't believe that our community existed in the church and in the world. It was everything that was on my heart, I was seeing lived out. Our charism of proclaiming the unique dignity of every human life, and just showing that every life has meaning. The radical mercy that I saw in our work with pregnant women and our post-abortion healing, it was just stunning to me to be before the beauty of God's mercy, and to be before all these women that God was redeeming in his love. And so I knew that this was the place where I was going to be called. And when I went on a visit, I went to the convent in the Bronx and walked in, and there was hanging a picture of John Cardinal O'Connor, who's the founder of our community, the Archbishop of New York. And it turns out he had been a Navy chaplain for 27 years. And the chief of Navy chaplains, and so I felt like he personally, even though he was deceased in the communion of saints, I felt like he welcomed me into the convent and showed me that I had a place there, and that he understood me and loved me and accepted me. And that experience of being accepted and known and loved is just such an essential piece of life. To be that experience of acceptance and belonging is what our hearts are made for, this experience of family. And so anyways, I went on a discernment retreat with the sisters, and I cried the whole time. It was like 5 days long. I'm sure they thought I was emotionally imbalanced, but I think it was just like this awareness of, it was everything. It was all the joys, the losses, the sorrows, it was the fears, everything was in those tears. And for 5 days straight, I cried. And then at the end of it, someone suggested I do the 33-day consecration to Mary, Louis de Montfort's version. And so on the last day, I began the total consecration. And on the 33rd day, I went back to the church where I was baptized when I was a little girl, where I had made my consecration after the day after my first Holy Communion, and I gave my life to Jesus through Mary again, and at the same altar, the same image of Our Lady. And then I went home that day, and my letter of acceptance arrived in the mail for the Sisters of Life. And so I just felt like it was Our Lady just confirming all of my steps and guiding me every step of the way. And so I entered it 17 years ago, and every morning, the first thing I do when I get in the chapel is I bless myself with holy water, and I thank God for my baptism, I thank God for my vocation, and it's been a tremendous gift. And so when we receive our names in the convent, you enter as a postulant, and then after 9 months, you receive the habit and a religious name, and I was given the name Maris Stella, which means Star of the Sea, in honor of our Blessed Mother, who guided, protected, won my vocation, and then also just an understanding of how God uses everything in our lives. My whole experience in the military and being in the Navy, that he brought all of it and integrated it together and for his glory and good. And so that's just a little of who I am. I wanted to show you this. This kind of captures also the essence of our community, this image, the Madonna of the streets, and I brought a bunch of them for you if you'd like to take them. this image of the Madonna, the streets, kind of symbolizes our work as the Sisters of Life, and kind of we wear it over our hearts because I think it's what's in the heart of every Sister of Life, and it's that there's this story. This is a famous Italian painting of. It's thought to be Mary walking with the baby Jesus, but really it's a diptych, which is two paintings next to one another. And the story is that Mary was walking through the streets with the Christ child, and then also walking through the streets was a woman of the streets, perhaps a prostitute who had just given birth to her child, and she was looking for someone, anyone to help her. And she turned around the corner and she ran into the Blessed Virgin Mary, and Mary took her child from her and gave her the Christ child. And so this is actually the woman of the streets, the prostitute who had received Christ and has been transformed. And this is really our spirituality of Sisters of Life, that we bring Christ to others and they receive Christ and they're transformed into their dignity as women, so much so that they're mistaken for the Blessed Virgin Mary. So that's the heart of a Sister of Life, to bring Christ to others so that women will know their dignity and how loved they are by God. So thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and just glad I could share my story. Thank you.